Deep divisions have taken root across the Middle East and North Africa. Both regions have become a battleground where opposing camps are competing to fill a power vacuum left by multiple conflicts and the toppling of longtime rulers. But few countries have intervened more forcefully and with deadly effect than the United Arab Emirates. Mohamed bin Zayed, the UAE's 58-year-old crown prince and de facto ruler, has used his country's vast wealth, including a nearly $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, to finance his ambitions in the Middle East and North Africa. Let's take a look at some of the trouble spots that MBZ, as he is popularly known, has gotten his country into. And joining me now is Mehmet Ogutcu, who is a former Turkish diplomat, and Mahjoob Zweiri, who is the director of the Gulf Studies Center at Qatar University. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So in this report, we saw a number of countries which the United Arab Emirates has intervened economically, politically, and militarily. It is no secret that Abu Dhabi has been pursuing an aggressive foreign policy with the backing of some countries. We'll also touch on its role in Somalia, Sudan, and Qatar. But Mahjoob, give us an overall picture of what drives the United Arab Emirates foreign policy. What kind of strategic gains it is getting out of this multi-layered interventionism?
It's important, Aisha, to look at the context. The context of all of this intervention is basically what was happening in the Arab world. It's the Arab Spring. Pre-Arab Spring, Emirates did not have this role. Three things push United Arab Emirates to do so. One, the political vacuum in the Arab world. Secondly, basically the determination to maintain the status quo as it was before 2010. And thirdly, some economic interest. And those three elements together basically shaped the foreign policy of United Arab Emirates since 2010.
So on the other hand, Mehmet, tell us about the nature of Turkey-UAE relations, because they're at their lowest point. There's this immense mistrust between them. When we take a look at the international affairs, they place themselves at the opposite camps. And tell us, why do you think they drifted apart that dramatically? Is it because of the Arab Spring?
Well, Arab Spring actually was one of the reasons why things have differed between the two countries, especially Turkey's strong support for Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is seen as an existential threat to United Arab Emirates, especially Abu Dhabi, and then also Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. So whereas Turkish relations with UAE and Saudi Arabia and then Egypt were at an exemplary level at some point, working together as a sort of a Sunni alliance in the region, vis-a-vis Iran and elsewhere. And things have changed dramatically now. I think one reason is that Turkey has abandoned its traditional, in quotation marks, peace at home, peace abroad, have become a regional power to reckon with. Because from whatever angle you look at Turkey, all the way from China to Germany, Saudi Arabia to Russia, Turkey is the real regional superpower to reckon with. By virtue of its economy, military, cultural hinterland, and economic interests, whatever you name. Now with the activist policy of UAE and Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and Turkey is seen sort of as a threat, and trying to project its regional dominance, not only in the Middle East, but also in East Med, but Africa and Horn of Africa, wherever you turn. So, however, I don't think that this is going to work, because Turkey is not a match for them. This is a huge
country
regional
when compared
superpower.
to. Now, if you will, let's take a closer look at the Emiratis' foreign entanglement in the region. As we mentioned in the report, the UAE is militarily involved both in Libya and Yemen for years. In Egypt, it is suspected of helping overthrow country's first democratically elected President Morsi and install General Sisi. In Sudan, the UAE supported the junta who cracked down on protests against deposed leader al-Bashir. In Somalia, the UAE is expected to open a military base in north and is currently backing breakaway provinces against the central government. And lastly, its blockade on Qatar nears almost 3 years now. So, having opened numerous fronts in different countries with which it shares no border, no proximity, no historic ties, its latest actions in Libya drew a lot of criticism and put the United States in a different position when the Tripoli government seized the weapons of the US, US-manufactured ones. Tell us about the UAE's objectives in Libya. What does it really want?
Again, I go back to the key word, is the context. For each of those cases you mentioned, there is a context. The context of Libya, two things. One, United Arab Emirates did not want Arab Spring to succeed in building a nation state in Libya. Secondly, they have no interest to see sort of state building, a nation building in Libya. And most important thing, they want to have a weak state close to Egypt, because let's not forget there is a very strong ties between Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. And to have an example, a nation state like Libya emerging, being strong, that will not help Egypt, which basically has a coup against the legitimate president. Yeah. So basically this tells you why the context is important. If you go to Yemen, there is another context. The Yemen was...
Yeah, we're going to touch on the Yemen issue, but tell me how and to which extent is this Tripoli government an existential threat both for the United Arab Emirates and Egypt? Why?
I don't think that they are existential threat to them.
That's what Egyptians say.
This is what they say. I mean, when you look at the picture now, General Haftar, as you know, he came out of blue from the United States where he was in exile. And now he's controlling almost 85% of the country and 70% of the oil resources in Libya. And he was about to sign this ceasefire agreement engineered by Russia and Turkey. And all of a sudden, after a telephone call from United Arab Emirates, probably from MBZ, and he had to fly from Moscow to Abu Dhabi. And I think it's part and parcel of the common objective of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt to have sort of a regional axe in the region, not allow a non-Arab country like Turkey to have more influence, because once you are in Libya and then you are in Yemen, Somalia, and Sudan, so this is going to have an impact on how Turkey will be projecting its power in the region. So also, most likely, US is behind that, rather than directly involved in this scheme of things. And it's using probably UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt to project its power in the region.
Okay, Mahjoob, although it's on the back burner now, I mean, tell us about what has happened in Yemen. Why do you think the United Arab Emirates is now actually winding down its presence, even at the expense of a drift with its ally, Saudi Arabia?
You know, United Arab Emirates joined the decisive storm when it started enjoying the support of the United States to this political operation. And while Saudi Arabia is saying they want to support the legitimate government, it appeared that Emirates and Saudis, they had different agenda in Yemen. Two things: one, the economic interest; secondly, the political interest. There was a very strong Muslim Brotherhood wing in Yemen, and we know that there is sort of demonization to Muslim Brotherhood as a whole. So basically, the same context again: anti-Muslim Brotherhood, as maintaining the status quo, weakening the nation state in Yemen, and those together basically pushed Emiratis to do whatever they done in Yemen.
And also there's Somalia, Mehmet. I mean, what does the UAE stand to gain by destabilizing Somalia? Because now it's backing semi-autonomous regions in the north.
Well, I mean, if you look
What's
at the
in it
map,
for
if
them?
you look at the map again, you will see that Somalia commands a very strategic choke point, and therefore it's also divided into two already, and therefore the interest of UAE and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, again, I see this as part of GCC countries plus Egypt minus Qatar, and trying to control this strategic position. This is also part of this talk we had before, whether we will have a Arab NATO.
Yes.
And so you have to
Anti-Iran,
think all this,
anti-Iran,
think,
basically.
and anti-Iran as well. And Turkey's position here is a bit peculiar because of Turkey's strong support and association with Muslim Brotherhood. It has fallen into the category of sort of arch enemy in the region because they see Turkey as a long-term threat to their scheme and or design for that region. I think there is room for Turkey to reflect a bit more about this rather than looking into things only from the Ihwan perspective. I think with the new openings we see in Turkish government in Ankara, and rather than confrontational approach with all these countries in the region, perhaps a more constructive, because Turkey, as I said in the beginning, by any definition is the regional superpower.
Okay.
None of them can match or compete with Turkey in influence.
All right, gentlemen. I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you for joining me on Straight Talk. I appreciate it a lot.
Pleasure.